Sorry, yeah. Okay, a warm welcome to one and all on day 3 of AARDO IITB training program. So yesterday on day 2, we heard Dr. Khetarpal from Apari, and we also heard from Professor Yang from Taiwan. And so they essentially, gave insights on agriculture, food and nutrition, linkage, both pandemic and post-pandemic in anticipation, what can happen and what could be done way forward, essentially. And Dr. Yang, she ended her presentation with essentially emphasizing on not just looking at food security in isolation, but how do you connect that with nutrition, but without compromising on environmental sustainability. So she did emphasize on that point as well. So on day 3, that is today, this is going to be very apt. The topic that we have chosen is going to focus on nutrition security. And we have, for a change, we have 3 speakers today, not 2. We have Dr. Robert Johnston joining us from Unicef. We will have Dr. Rupal Dalal. She is directly joining from US, California. And we have Professor Ratna Thar. She is from Mumbai. So she is also joining us today. So I invite Professor Agnihotri to moderate the session. Just a couple of words about Professor Agnihotri. So he's former head of Sitara IIT Bombay. So before joining IIT Bombay as professor, he spent, I would say, more than 30 years in government as an Indian administrative officer in different positions with different stature and huge accomplishments, I would say. And this may not be right time to get into those things, but I think he has immense experience when it comes to child malnutrition. So those who are interested, I think we should definitely be in touch with him. He can give you, millions of dollars of worth advice, in a very short span of time. So I think it's worth talking to him regarding that. So with that, I'll welcome Professor Agnihotri to moderate the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. That was rather generous. So I request all the audience to discount those kind words. Today, as Professor Amit said, it's a very apt flow from where Dr. Yang left yesterday. We have Dr. Robert Johnson from Unicef. He has certain time constraints, so I will not introduce the other 2 speakers right now. I will straight away go to Dr. Johnston. But before that, to all the participants, one good news and one bad news. Now, one good news is since many participants had requested for tomorrow's session to be deferred in view of Friday being a holiday, we have accepted that. And the bad news is on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, each day we will be having half an hour extra to compensate for this. So with this, I think I will let me quickly introduce Dr. Johnson. Robert is a UNICEF nutrition specialist. He has more than 2 decades of experience in public health nutrition in developing countries. And he has worked in Central America, Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and India. So it's quite apt that today's audience, he will be able to relate to their problems quite effectively, and they will also be able to relate to his presentation. He has degrees in international development, public health nutrition, and nutritional epidemiology. He did from Tulane University and London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. His specific interests in the field of nutrition include data for decision-making, anthropometry, and using technology for improved monitoring and evaluation. Let me tell you that Dr. Robert is also a very hard taskmaster, and I've been learning it the hard way. And but one must say that he brings in an element of academic rigor in the program implementation, which is a delight, because you can't do away with science and you can't do away with technology. Emotional responses is one part of the story. So he always keeps your feet to the ground, and his passion about data for policy, I think, has essentially infected our students also, for which we are thankful to him. But without much ado, I'll request Dr. Robert to give his talk, and we have specially requested him to emphasize on the Unicef's conceptual framework, which has been recently revised. And that, I think, will be very, very useful for participants from different countries. We will be requesting all participants in the final day presentation to reflect, maybe just for half a minute or in one slide, as to how is the UNICEF conceptual framework relevant for their country and how much applicable it is for their country. So over to you, Robert, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. I'll share my screen and so I can get started. Thank you so much for that, that very, very kind introduction. Can you see my screen now? Just testing.
Yes, it needs to be made full screen.
Okay, can you see the full screen? I've got the full screen working. Is it working for you?
Not yet.
I might need to try again. Now, how is that? Can you see the full screen now?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, good.
Full screen and you are audible, so please go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry for that. Thank you so much, Agnihotri, for your introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here with Dr. Dalal and Dr. Tar. And thank you, Amit, for organizing all of this work. It's very, very much a pleasure. And thanks for everyone to be a part of this. I think it's brilliant, the work that you're doing and getting involved in the food systems that is becoming and being recognized as so much more important than it ever has been before. And I think we're all learning as we go on how to make these food systems work for us. I'm going to give a talk today on nutrition and food security through the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is sort of an impossible task because the amount of information that we have is both overwhelming and it's not adequate. So we cannot really tell exactly what's been happening during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so that makes it quite a challenge. So I'll just jump in to get started. I want to cover today first the difference between nutrition and food security, and then looking a little bit about the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on nutrition and food security, and lastly, what needs to be done to protect against the threats of food insecurity and malnutrition during this time, right? So I'd like to start with this question of what is the difference between food security and nutrition? And I've found when working in sub-Saharan Africa, I found that this question came up because there was often a confusion between nutrition and food security, and often this idea that nutrition was only reliant on food, and when you provide food, then you address the nutrition needs. And unfortunately, as we get into more in depth into the nutrition conceptual framework, you'll see how far we are from that. And so I want to start with the rights-based approach, because that's always a very good foot to start on. The right to nutrition for children was outlined in the Convention for the Rights of the Child in 1989, and for women in the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women in 1980. But the right to food was recognized even earlier in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and that was around the same time as the creation of the UN system. Now, I've been working in India. I've had the pleasure of working in India for the past 4 years. And I want to highlight that India has really taken this a step further. They highlighted the right to food in their constitution in 1950. And then again, in 2001, the Constitutional Court recognized the right to food, transforming the policy choice into enforceable rights. And this has come up several times, and it does come up regularly in the news about how different organizations address the right to food in vulnerable populations. And so it becomes a lively part of the discourse of the entire country, which is incredible to see that there is so much focus and interest and dedication to the rights of right to food. So looking at what is the difference between food security and malnutrition, I want to tell you a story about Idris. Idris comes from the Kanem region in central Chad. And this area is just north of Lake Chad, but you'll see in the picture on the right, it's quite arid. It's a desert landscape where there are oases and there are access to water, but it's very dry. And it's a quite stunning landscape if you ever have a chance to visit. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. But when I visited Kanem, I had the chance to go and visit the health centers where they were providing management of severe acute malnutrition services. And this is where I met Idris. And Idris was he was an 11-month-old boy child, right? And his mother had brought him into the management of severe acute malnutrition ward where he was receiving treatment. And you'll see right now, you'll see in his nose, he has a nasal gastric tube, and he's been receiving treatment. He's been receiving antibiotics and liquids through that. And the region where he comes from is renowned for having poor food security and chronic malnutrition, right? So now you notice that he's severely thin and his arms are severely wasted, right? Now, my question to you is that if this was a question about food availability, then what would you assume about his family? If the food was not available for him and his entire family, you would assume that the entire family would be hungry, they would be wasted, they would be visibly malnourished, right? But when you look at his family, you can see that his mother and his two sisters are actually quite healthy, right? So you see that his two school-age sisters were not visibly malnourished, and the mother was not visibly malnourished, right? So if food was the problem, then all of the family would be malnourished. But it's really a question about the feeding behaviors and the caring practices that really make all the difference for the youngest children. So Idris is a 11-month infant, and he only needs about 800 calories a day, where his sisters need at least twice of that. So that means that there's enough food in the family to maintain the mother and the two sisters, but it's the youngest child with the smallest amount of food and calorie needs that is suffering from acute malnutrition. So when we look at what the malnutrition conditions are by age and months in Chad, from the time when Idris was a young child, we can see that acute malnutrition here in blue, it starts about 10% at birth, and it increases to about 25% by 12 months of age. And so in this pink area that's highlighted on the graph, we can see this is when malnutrition really starts to accelerate in young children. And this is in Chad, but we see similar patterns all across sub-Saharan Africa. So within the first 6 months of age, 6 months of life, the child ends its exclusive breastfeeding period and starts to eat complementary food. The child starts to explore, the child puts food into its mouth, and also starts to consume different foods that are foods or different objects that would cause diarrhea or other illnesses. And this is when malnutrition really starts to take off. And so when we see Idris as an 11-month-old child, we know that he is following some of these exact same patterns and becoming acutely malnourished in the first 2 years of life. So let's look at what are some other differences between food security and nutrition. Food security largely relates to the production and access and the availability of food, where nutrition is really very closely related to the intake of that food and the absorption of nutrients. So you can see in this picture that the woman on the right with goiter has a visible swelling in her throat, right? And this is directly related to the fact that she has a deprivation in iron consumption and absorption, right? So the two different domains of nutrition and food security, they only come together in very, very close coordination in times of famine. And outside of famine, there's significant differences between what your food security conditions might be and what your nutrition conditions might be. And so I think this relates to the quality of the measurements that we have, and it also relates to the different types of measurements that we take for food security and for nutrition. How do we measure nutrition? I think most of you know that for the most common measures of children, measures of nutrition, we measure height and weight, middle arm circumference, and then in extreme situations, bilateral edema, where the child has specific micronutrient or nutrient deficiencies and starts to swell and develop infections. So these are the most common, simple ways to measure nutrition. And I'm sure that all of you have probably seen this type of work done many, many times in your own countries. How do we measure food security? Food security is much more of a challenge because it is a much more complex set of behaviors and activities. Food security can be measured with food prices, with household food storage, with the wages or livelihoods of workers, with the terms of trade that currently exist in that country or that community, with the socioeconomic status of that family, that household, if they are indebted or not. Sometimes they measure the percent of income that is spent on food. They measure different effects of weather, rainfall, agricultural production, also household expenditures, household food consumption, dietary diversity, different coping strategies and responses to shock and management of shock. And then, as we've seen in the COVID pandemic, we've seen a significant amount of migration. You can also relate food security to violence and unrest. More recently, there's been a collection of data around perceptions of hunger and measuring that through different questions in the household food insecurity access scale, where they ask questions about hunger and skipping meals and availability of access to food. So measurement of food security is complex. That's what I'm trying to communicate here. And there are several different ways of measuring food security. Now, we've made a lot of progress in the last few years to identify more robust measures, but there are a huge variety of food security measures, and we have to keep that in mind when we look at food security. How do we measure hunger? Hunger is a very difficult concept because we all experience hunger, but not all of us experience the negative side effects of being hungry on a regular basis. So the current methods that we have significant flaws and limitations in representing the magnitude and the severity of hunger. And these fundamental questions are not, they are being addressed. They for a long time, they weren't sufficiently addressed. And we note that FAO has defined that there is no single way to measure all of the multiple dimensions of hunger and food security. But what I do want to highlight is in the last few years, the work of FAO through measuring food insecurity and the Voices of the Hungry Project, they've done a tremendous amount of work to standardize measures of food insecurity and to be able to collect those measures across a majority of countries in the world, which is an amazing piece of work. And also the work that World Food Program has been doing and is represented here in their hunger map, that they have recognized that food security is not something that we need to collect data on once a year, but food security is something that we need to be attentive to in the real time, because the conditions are very transient. They change from 1 minute to the next, and the food security conditions today can have an impact on tomorrow, but tomorrow can be completely different, and that impact can change overnight. So the work that they're doing to make collection of data real time is making a huge step forward in the work of monitoring food security. So food security is challenging because it has different effects on population, but the effects of malnutrition are much more clearly documented in the academic literature. We know very clearly that malnutrition can be defined as both undernutrition and overnutrition, and that both of these have negative effects on the population. So undernutrition can lead to retardation of both physical and mental growth. And I think that we've really come to recognize the issues that that the mental stunting is what really limits the countries, communities from really achieving their true potential. And this is why it's so critical to address the effects of malnutrition. And it also affects households and communities with a decreased capacity to work, losses of economic productivity, and then also the effects of non-communicable disease, the development of non-communicable disease such as cardiovascular disease and diabetes in adulthood. So we know that these types of malnutrition have very strong effects, and that up to 45% of the deaths of under 5 children is caused by malnutrition globally. And in India, further research published in The Lancet in 2019 has found that 68% of child deaths are still directly linked to malnutrition. And that's why I want to bring your attention to the Unicef Conceptual Framework for Nutrition. So this conceptual framework on the right gives us a method to interpret the causes of malnutrition, and so that we can better face them. Right? So in this conceptual framework, we start at the top with the outcomes for women and children. And we know that good nutrition is not too little or it's not too much. It's just in the middle. So we talk a lot about all forms of malnutrition. And when we talk about all forms of malnutrition, we're talking about undernutrition. We're also talking about overweight and obesity and micronutrient deficiencies. So these are the outcomes that we have in terms of nutrition and what we can measure, right? So by ensuring good maternal and child nutrition, we improve child survival, maternal survival, physical growth, cognitive development, and performance and achievement at school and in individual and household livelihoods. We look at the next row and we can see the immediate determinants. And these immediate determinants are diets and caring practices. So these two work very closely together to impact on nutrition. Good quality of food, if not given to the child in an appealing way, can lead to the child becoming malnourished. So some children have eating difficulties, and you really have to spend a tremendous amount of time in that care to ensure that the child consumes nutrient-dense foods, and then the child absorbs those foods and can benefit from that nutrition. So at this level, we're really talking about what actions, what food choices are made and what actions are given to ensure the consumption of nutrient-dense food. On the next level, we have the underlying determinants, where we look directly at food. And so here food security comes into the question, right? Here we're looking at availability of safe quality food, that it's been cleaned with safe water, and it's provided to the child at the right quantity and the right nutrient density, along with breast milk, to ensure that that child can grow to his or her full potential. And then in the middle, we have the feeding practices, where we know that the different feeding actions are different according to the different ages. We know that complementary feeding must start by 6 months of age, and we must give a nutrient-dense diet that includes a range of micronutrients to ensure that that child can grow. And those always should be provided through food-based sources, but when they are not, and we recognize that there are deficiencies, we recommend that they also are addressed with supplementary foods and fortified foods. And then in terms of the environment, we have to ensure that there is a safe environment where there is effective sanitation, there's effective hygiene, and the water is of good quality to ensure that there is no sickness that is coming from the environment. And all of these must be delivered along with effective care-seeking behavior for illness. If the child does have an illness, that the parents, the caregivers, can recognize what that illness is and go to seek the correct care to ensure that the child is cared for and recovers quickly from that illness. And then on the last rows, we have the enabling determinants, where we have the different resources, such as financial resources, environmental resources, and knowledge resources about how best to manage nutrition conditions for women and children. And this also translates into norms and practices within a culture and a community, and about what is the level of women's status in a community to ensure that she can have access to the right foods for her nutrition and for the nutrition of her children. And finally, the governance mechanisms that are needed to ensure that we all have access to foods and livelihoods. So if I wanted to simplify this entire conceptual framework for nutrition, I would say 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. That 1/3 of the causes of malnutrition in children are caused by the direct caring practices and the access to essential nutrition services for that child. So that's 1/3 is related to the services and the care that is given to the child. And 1/3 is related to the women's status. And by that, I mean whether the woman married young, whether the woman has education, whether the woman has livelihood and access to resources. And finally, the last 1/3 is really related to socioeconomic status, and that we cannot address malnutrition without addressing poverty. And we must address poverty to eliminate malnutrition. And it can be addressed through the social safety nets that we use to ensure good health and nutrition for women and children. So hopefully with that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 division, you can make good sense of this conceptual framework for nutrition. So in terms of what nutrition actions that Unicef has been a part of to help prevent backsliding of malnutrition during this period of COVID and the pandemic, we have committed to address malnutrition through our famine prevention and mitigation strategy. And we've come out with a global call to enact these 5 urgent actions to protect children's nutrition during the pandemic. And these are to protect the diets of children, to invest in maternal and child nutrition through pregnancy, infancy, and early childhood, to ensure that we have services available for the detection and treatment of child wasting, to maintain nutritious and safe school meals and open schools as soon as possible, and to expand those social protection safety nets to ensure access to nutritious diets and essential services. I want to now take a step away. We've been focusing a lot on malnutrition and undernutrition and what we can typically consider to be the most depressing, the saddest cases of children who are suffering from too little food. But and before I came to India, I often had this perception that a lot of Indians were malnourished. And so that I would come here and I would see that very obviously in everywhere I went. But when I arrived in India, I found that that the population is not visibly malnourished. And when you go to specific areas, you do find undernutrition. But when, as recognized in this Lancet article, that India made the nutrition transition from undernutrition to overnutrition in 2003. And that means that the deaths and the disabilities that were caused by non-communicable diseases and injuries overtook those that are caused by communicable disease, maternal, neonatal, and nutritional disease. So this happened almost 20 years ago in India. And so you do have a population that is becoming more normal weight and more overweight. And this process is happening all around the world. So we still have the unfinished agenda of undernutrition in India, but we also have the new challenges of overweight and obesity to address. And that is critical to take into account when we look at food security. So there's a lot of myths around food security that have been uncovered by one of the experts, Ed Frangillo, in measurement of food security. And one of the critical myths that goes on and on is that they consider that food insecurity and poverty leads to undernutrition. But we have seen in many cases that food insecurity can lead to obesity also in females. And we do have this problem. So we need to recognize our food security social safety nets have to also take into account the rise of overweight and obesity. And also sometimes people say that parents can protect their children from food insecurity. And new research has been done to show that children actually suffer from the effects of food insecurity in households, and that women are often affected first by food security in households. So when we look closely about what each individual food security measures assess, we find that each discipline uses its own jargon to define food security, and that confuses a lot of us around what is actually being measured. And that we note that food security is a necessary component, but it's not sufficient to achieve good nutrition. So food security has really several important associations, such as, for example, in pregnancy, it's Food insecurity can be found in different ethnic groups and socioeconomic classes, education groups. It can be related to maternal depression and high stress levels. It can be related to overweight and obesity, excessive weight gain during pregnancy, and diabetes. It can also be related to insufficient weight gain during pregnancy, preterm birth, and low birth weight. So all of these details, have to be taken into account when we're looking at what our food security interventions are. Looking at what happened in India, specifically in terms of food security and nutrition, one study has found, a study done in 15 states, that 87% of low-income households were able to access food through the Indian public distribution system. So they were able to access grains and pulses to prevent them from becoming food insecure. But they also, about 24% of the women, 24% women represent about 24% of the workforce, and about 1/3 of all women lost their jobs during the pandemic. About 10% of women reported to have limited food intake or have ran out of food during the pandemic and the lockdown period. Women suffered often the worst in the family's food shortages and the limitation of food quality. And women also had reduction in access to contraception during the lockdown. So women at the same time were having reduced access to nutrient-dense foods, but also becoming pregnant. So this gives them the risk of having low birth weight babies. Now, this study did collect its data with telephone interviews, and so we recognized that could introduce a bias, and that bias could lead to underreporting of some results. Another important piece of research that was done during COVID pandemic period was this research in Uttar Pradesh. And Uttar Pradesh is the largest state in India, and it's larger than a majority of countries in the world. For example, it's larger in terms of population than Nigeria. And this survey was done looking at the conditions of population and the services delivered by frontline workers, the essential nutrition services. And they found that immediately post the lockdown, services had resumed, but availability of the services was much lower during the pre-pandemic period. On the demand side, they found a substantial reduction between 40 to 80 percentage points in household use of services. The respondents noted that they were afraid of becoming infected with COVID, and they were afraid to meet with the frontline workers. And so this made it very clear that we do need to be concerned about ensuring that there are demand for these essential safety net services during any type of threat or pandemic. And we always need to take gender into account when we're looking at our response to different types of natural disasters or threats. In this case, India provided women with a Jan Dhan account, which there was a mechanism for cash transfer. And this was done because women had significant losses to livelihood and losses of assets during this crisis. Women are often affected by this financial instability, and the financial instability leads to effects on children's schooling, and that all have negative impact on girls' education. Women are also at risk of reduction in access to health services. And then as women are often the caregivers in their family, they're at much higher risk of becoming infected. So we always have to consider gender in all of our food security, nutrition responses. Another really important point is that there are very significant seasonal differences in countries. Here we're looking at the seasonality of wasting in India. And we can see from survey data that has been carefully analyzed, adjusting for any differences in socio-demographic differences across the month, that we can see that wasting goes between a peak of about 25% in the summer rainy season to the lowest levels in the winter season of about 12%. And this happens every year. And what this means is that the social safety nets are not able to prevent this rise, this annual increase in wasting. And what needs to be done is that we need to redesign our social safety nets to ensure that we eliminate any seasonal effect of wasting, and not just in children under 5, but also in women of reproductive age. We can see that some of the reasons behind this seasonality are the availability of nutrient-dense foods, and the prices of nutrient-dense foods does vary dramatically between the different times of year due to the availability of those foods. And we found in research on food prices and wage data that affordability of even the lowest cost diets can be out of range, and they can be unaffordable, especially for women, and that a greater focus is needed on ensuring affordability of nutrient-dense foods. When we look at the evolution of food prices in India over the past year, in 2020, we can see that vegetable prices were very volatile, but that was related to normal seasonal differences, and that the prices of pulses have gone up up to 20%. Prices of animal source foods originally dropped because people were afraid to consume these foods, but then they went back up after the lockdown period. There were decline in food prices, but then these also went up afterwards. There was little to no change in dairy because this is a very consistent food that is consumed in India and also supported through government subsidies. So as I begin to come to the conclusions of this presentation, I want to introduce you to this presentation that was done by Rafael Perez Escalilla, where he went through the process of how the food security monitoring that was done in Brazil and Mexico has really been able to grasp the attention of policymakers and lead to policy choices that addressed both nutrition, food security, and poverty. And that this is, I think, what we all aspire to do in our work, and to address all 3 of these components at the same time. So we'll share this presentation with you. You'll see a lot of there are links on a lot of the slides for you to go further in all of the different resources that we have available around the different topics that I've addressed. And lastly, I want to say that our responsibility is really to eliminate malnutrition, and what gets measured gets done. And that's why I'm presenting a piece of work here that is a website tracking malnutrition conditions in India that has been developed by Institute of Technology, Bombay, by Professor Agnihotri and his team. And you will see that in this site that they track not just the outcomes of malnutrition, but also all of the inputs of malnutrition. And the inputs were defined based on that nutrition conceptual framework, so that we can track what's happening at the feeding practice level, at the delivery of essential nutrition services, at the seeking of healthcare, and all of the infant and young children feeding practices, along with women's status and socioeconomic status. So we can, to address malnutrition, both overweight and undernutrition, we really need to have tools like this that monitor regularly our activities to eliminate malnutrition. And this monitoring has to be done regularly, even in real time as possible, has to be done robustly with good quality data, and it has to be done with granularity, so we can see down to the lowest levels exactly what's happening to the population. And so on the last note, I want to say that we all have a huge challenge in front of us to address these food security, and I wish you all good luck. hope to have a chance to work with you all in the future. Over. Thank you all.
Thank you, Robert, very much. I think this was a very apt continuation of the concerns which were raised by Dr. Yang yesterday, and we see this continuity. This conceptual framework will help all the participants, and there are issues which are coming up, and the participants will also be interested in finding out how do we address them. Thank you also for pointing out to this website that we have developed. We were waiting for your presentation to get over today. We will be sharing it with all of them. And if any of the country participants wish that this could be done for their country, I think they could approach us through AARDO, and maybe with the Unicef support, we will try and do it for them, because we believe in the open source philosophy in IIT as a matter of course. So we don't go for proprietary software and other things. So it is something which can be shared with the member countries. And I think if AARDO can also take note of this, and they are very much in Delhi, so they could also come across and discuss with the Unicef. Having said that, I think we will take 2-3 quick questions if audience has any before we move to the next speakers, because Robert has a meeting scheduled after this. So if those who want to ask questions may please raise their hands or put their question in the chat box. I'm already seeing one hand, Yaya Hilal Abdullah. Would you please ask your question?
I think that's by mistake, so we could.
Okay, or was it an old hand?
Yes.
Yeah. In which case, Param, are we seeing any questions on either chat box, or in case there's a YouTube channel open, because some of the participants have a problem for Zoom, so we have allowed YouTube live streaming. So
No, so far there are no questions in chat box.
right. So if that be the case, then I think we will thank Robert for this very thought-provoking presentation, and then we will move on to next speakers. So thank you very much, Robert, and you are welcome to stay and free to leave. That's the given your other constraint. And then I will.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your consideration. That's very, very, very much appreciated. Yeah. Thank you.
And it was really enlightening. So in fact, when I hear your presentations, every time I learn a couple of things, new things myself. So thank you very much. So I think, the next point, as I said, the other two speakers will essentially address some of the issues that Robert has raised. So for example, when you see Idris and find out that Idris's problem is not so much of the food being available in the household, but how to give that food or how to breastfeed Idris effectively. I think these are the questions which my other two colleagues who are going to make presentation have actually grappled with, and they have also addressed those issues, basically of effective breastfeeding, and I'm using this word quite carefully, as exclusive breastfeeding is not same as effective breastfeeding. Is my voice all right? Because I get a comment saying that voice is a little feeble.
No, we can hear you well.
Okay, yeah. No,
I can't see you though.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Apologies for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, Dr. Rupal and Dr. Ratna have grappled with these issues of not just breastfeeding, but young child feeding practices. And you will also see again on Monday that we have come up with a new teaching methodology where we directly go to the mother, and we have translated these open tutorial videos in many Indian languages. We have also gone into languages like Arabic and Persian, so they may be of interest to some of the participants. we are putting those video in tribal languages. So, but about that I will come to later. We have also done one thing that our postdoc fellow, Dr. Ripta, she has compiled a survey of literature, the issues which Robert has raised, Dr. Young raised yesterday, and some of the issues that Dr. Rupal and Dr. Ratna will be addressing. Dipta has done a review of literature, and we'll be sharing that with you as well, so that it becomes a good takeaway even after the training program. So right now, let me first request Professor Rupal. She is our adjunct associate professor. Right now, as I said, she is in US, but we were a little guilty about asking her to come for this presentation, but she said, no, she is used to the emergency roster in her, in her hospital duty. So this also she is treating as a duty towards the children. Dr. Rupal Dalal, she did her MBBS and she did her MD. She is an ace pediatrician, I would say, apart from being adjunct associate professor here. She is also associated with Santa Clara Valley Medical Hospital in San Jose. So very interestingly, she toggles back and forth between, let us say, the Californian context and the context of the tribal India, and we quite admire her how she manages. But on a more concrete side, and if you notice, I had mentioned this point that an ounce of practice is better than a ton of theory. She has, to her credit, training programs of frontline workers and the mothers, where we now see a low birth weight baby through effective breastfeeding, not only having a catch-up growth, but probably competing with a American child in the percentile chart. So for Dr. Rupal practices what she preaches. But without much ado, I will request her to make a brief presentation today, because she's also be taking a more detailed class on Monday. So Dr. Rupal, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting me. And of course, this is the topic that I'm completely passionate about, as you know. So please let me know as soon as my time is up. Good afternoon, everybody. This is actually, for me, it's good morning. Today, I'm going to talk about nutrition security in young children. And I'm going to speak from pediatrician point of view. Of course, my training has been in the US, and we have extremely strong background on growth monitoring, because we don't allow children in America to do growth monitoring. We do have an issue of food security even in US, but the growth monitoring is so strict over here that all these children are kind of monitored either by pediatrician or by family physician or by nurse practitioners who are trained in growth monitoring. And when I came back to India in 2006, I felt that growth monitoring was lacking in public health and public health nutrition in India, and that's where my journey began of understanding that why we are having so many undernourished children in India. So, important question that I had. Of course, being physician, we were not trained as much on nutrition, but I asked myself, what is nutrition? What are those terminologies of food security, nutrition security? What does a security encompass? So obviously, Robert has mentioned a lot about food security versus nutrition security. So I'm not going to go too much in detail about that. But that was my question. Then, of course, why young children? Why being a pediatrician, it was very, very important for me that, I focused on this young children, young babies, and how basically, how we can create or come up with solutions so that, we don't have this issue. So a couple of, I mean, of course, everybody knows about nutrients, nutrition, since the whole seminar is on nutrition. So just touching base on simple understanding of all this terminology. So nutrient is the constituent. So we have all these nutrients in a diet, including your vitamins, your minerals, your macronutrient, your micronutrient, your proteins, fats, carbohydrates. So those are all nutrients in the food. Nutritious is the description. So whether the food is nutritious or not, whether the food has enough nutrients which are required for child to grow, for us to maintain our health, that is a nutritious, it's a description of the food. And nutrition is the state or condition. So going back to nutrients, so basically we require about 40 essential nutrients in a diet. So I'll come back to it in detail, but these are all the nutrients that we required in a diet. Nutritious foods. So these are some of the nutritious food that I've mentioned, and these nutrients are kind of very high in nutrient density, specifically your pulses, your seeds, your dairy, your non-veg food, lots of green leafy vegetables, cruciferous vegetables. Those are very highly nutrient dense food. What is the nutrition status? So nutrition status of infant is basically how child is growing. Again, Robert mentioned about the anthropometric measurement, about micronutrient measurements. So he already mentioned, so I won't go too much in detail, but this is a nutrition. Look, if you look at the baby and if you look at the weight and the length of the child, you should immediately make out, oh, this child has a good nutrition. Or this baby who is basically just 2 months old, and even from far off, I can make out that this baby has amazing nutrition status. So baby is well nourished and does not look malnourished at all, and that is looking at the anthropometric measurement. Now it doesn't tell me anything about the micronutrient deficiency. So obviously I need to check baby's CBC or hemoglobin to make sure child is not anemic or child doesn't have any other micronutrient deficiency. But basically those are the different kinds of nutrition status. This is in toddlers. So again, looking at them, I can make out that, oh, this 15-month-old child looks good, well built, looks a good height. Same thing, this twin children, 18 months old, looks like a good nutrition status. So that is your nutrition status. Now, one more thing I wanted to add to Robert, what he mentioned about food security and nutrition security. In 1996, the definition was more of access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food to meet dietary needs. But in 2012 report, they basically added sanitation, health services and care. Now, this is extremely important again from the point of view of pediatrician, because young children, they do fall sick. And if you don't have health services, if you don't have enough, mean to go to hospital or doctors or, say A&M, which is auxiliary nurse midwife, the children, then they go into this malnutrition cycle, because when they are sick, they don't eat well. And if they are not taking care of their diarrhea, if the zinc is not given, if they are not treated with proper appropriate care, then the children are at very high risk of getting into malnutrition. So this addition was very, very important. Sanitation is extremely important, because I have worked in urban slum and the sanitation is extremely poor in not only urban slum, but also in tribal and rural areas. Now, why young children? Specifically, again, Robert mentioned about the brain development. So it's not only about the brain development, which is absolutely tremendous in first 1,000 days. We all know about first 1,000 days, which starts from conception to 2 years of age, but it is also the physical growth. So that physical growth is also extremely important, because when you look at the data from Lancet, which just got published a couple of years ago, in India, average 19-year-old woman is only 5 feet. An average male, a 19-year-old male is only 5 feet 4 inches. So we're concerned that, basically the stunting is definitely an issue, not only in children, but in adulthood also. So here, basically my goal is to make our children of course, healthy and nutrition-wise, absolutely in good nutrition status, tall, physical health, and mental health. Then brain cognition. So cognition is as important as your physical health. And this is one of the, I'm sure you must have seen this graph where it shows basically this green line shows, a green box shows your first 1,000 days. So from conception to 2 years of age. And then basically, this is the brain growth that they have shown. So if you look at the brain development, so during pregnancy time, you have the brain development. The manufacturing of the brain occurs in pregnancy time. So your pregnancy nutrition is as important as your, postnatal care of mothers and nutrition of the baby. So here in, within 3 weeks of conception, you have the development of neural tube. Neural tube basically gets developed into your brain and spinal cord. And here is a differentiation of the basically cell migration. So here where the different parts of brain starts developing. But if you look at this lines, this is myelination. So myelination is the fatty sheet which kind of deposits around the neuron cells, and that basically kind of takes messenger, from periphery to brain and from brain to periphery. So if you look at it, the green line, basically that's your myelination, and that occurs mainly in first couple of months. Okay, so that peaks around say around 2 months of age, and this is the time when child has basically development of visual cortex and auditory cortex. So that when the baby is born, baby can see, baby can hear. In US basically we do hearing test, which is compulsory for all the babies which are born. And then at around 7 to 8 months of age, you have another area of brain which is developing, which is myelinating very fast, which is your area of receptive language. So receptive language means when you talk to the baby of that 8-month-old baby, baby will be very, very receptive. So if you say something, they start speaking baba, mama, that's your speech production. And when you speak to them, they smile, they laugh, so these are basically your receptive languages, which is occurring, myelination is occurring around 8 to 9 months of age. And at around 1 to 1.5 years of age, you have higher cognitive function. So that's when basically your prefrontal cortex myelination is occurring, where children are becoming extremely, they're acquiring cognition. So this is the time you can see that most of their development is occurring in 2 years of age. So that's why your nutrition security is extremely important for your children if you want them to thrive. And here is basically a growth chart which I've taken from weight for age percentile growth chart. Again, in pediatrics, we are taught percentile growth chart because this is the best chart to monitor the growth of an individual child. So if you want to individually monitor each and every child, we don't go with the Z score. Z score is mainly, we look at the population level, how many children are undernourished. That's your standard deviation growth charts. But in pediatrics, even in US, we use under 5, we use weight for age chart. So if you look at the growth trajectory of a child, so this is your birth. These are your 5 lines of basically 58th percentile, which is your average, 85th percentile, which where 15% children are above this line and 85% children are below. So here is basically, your 97% children are below this line, and so only 3% children are bigger than this particular, the highest top line. And similarly, if you look at, going downward, basically 15% children are below this line, and 3% children are below the last line. So average children in all the countries, and we know the WHO has been basically kind of the data came from 6 different countries where India was part of it, and average child should be on this middle line. Okay, so my target when I'm looking at the child, I would target it to bring this child to 58th percentile, because as child goes lower and lower on the percentile child, it does affect the physical growth and it does affect their mental IQ. Okay, so this is what my goal. And if you look at the trajectory of growth in a child, the maximum growth occurs in first 3 months of life. So to hear from, basically, if you look at the 50th percentile, look at the growth trajectory. Okay, that's your 3 months. And then next 3 months, it slows down. So you can see the slowing down of the growth from 3 months to 6 months of age. And after 6 months, when the complementary feeding starts, that's when this growth really kind of slows down. And after 1 year of age, it's children grow very, very slowly. So if you want child to pick up fast, and to grow rapidly, this is the time, which is your first 3 months. After 3 months, yes, if child is undernourished, and if you kind of teach mothers how to breastfeed properly, the skills, they do catch up. But in my experience of almost 10,000 babies that we have monitored, very difficult, even after 3 months, if babies come to us, very difficult to have that so much of catch-up growth. So I do focus, and of course, you want your children to be born healthy. So that's where the pregnant nutrition comes in. You want your child to be average birth weight, which is about 3.2 kilogram in girl child and 3.3 kilogram in a boy child. Now, unfortunately, in India, our average birth weight is very, very low. 2.7 is the average birth weight. And if you go in rural, very kind of tribal areas, urban slum, average birth weight is even lower than 2.7. So we are born small. And for that, basically, then we need to really work hard on breastfeeding practices so that they catch up faster. So this is what, and this is some of the articles that I wanted to kind of discuss, that timing of growth faltering, I will discuss like what are the timing of growth faltering occurring all over the world. And this was an article which was published in 2018. So what they did, basically, they took data of about 7 lakh children from 0 to 5 years of age. And they basically took data from 57 different countries. Now, 50% of the children, they came from African countries, sub-Saharan African countries. About 9% of children came from South Asia, about Asia, and the rest of them come from other different, South America and other countries. So here, what they did is basically they checked the weight for height, they checked for height, and they checked for weight. And what they found, this is what they found. Okay, so this is the weight for height, which is your wasting, which is your acute malnutrition. And I'm sure yesterday, I think all these criteria were discussed. So I'm not going to go too much in detail about what is wasting, what is underweight, and what is stunting. But if you look at this solid line is of boys, and that dotted line is of girls. And this is the age, so from 0 months to your 5 years of age, and this is your standard deviation. So if you look at it, average children are born above average. If you look at the average children, unfortunately, in India, our children are not born above average. They are not even born mean. Our children are born at much lower, standard deviation. But when you look at the slope, so this is from 0 to 6 months of age. Look at the slope coming down. I'm talking about the average. Even babies who are born above mean, they are falling off. Do you see? This is like a slide going down. When you start sliding down, very difficult at 6 months to then stop the sliding. Because these children who are sliding down, they have poor appetite. And this is my field experience, that if you want to have a good 6 months old above children, good nutrition or good uptake of nutrition, they need to have a good appetite. But children, when they're falling down, they're metabolically unhealthy and very difficult to kick in that, kind of stimulation of appetite to have that uptake of nutrition-rich diet. So I do focus a lot on those first 1 year of life. And then you can see the peak is basically at 12 months of age. So wasting peaks around 12 to 13 months of age, and then they start picking up. So you can see the wasting is maximum under 12 months of age. Okay, so if you really want to focus on your SAM, focus on those first 1 year of age, starting from pregnancy, from conception. Now here is your height. So if you look at this, again, the sloping of height is occurring. So you can see, if somebody can mute the mic, that would be great. So here, this is the height again. The height again is sloping down in first 6 months of age. And then it basically, child slides down really, really fast. And it, at around 21 months of age, it kind of maximizes, and then there is no improvement in height if you look at it. So this means that basically stunting is irreversible, very difficult to reverse that stunting. I would say even after 6 months of age, child came to me stunted, very difficult to reverse the stunting. But as you can see, when you follow these children up, and this data of 7 lakh children. Now, why is it important again as a pediatrician to focus on this first year of life? Because if you look at this one beautiful article which was published in 2012, what they found that if you have a good linear growth before 12 months of age, linear growth means the height. So if a child is growing beautifully in length till 12 months of age, and the child who is gaining a good amount of weight in first 4 months of age, before 4 months of age, those children had a higher IQ at 9 years of age. Okay, so basically your brain development in first year is the key. Okay, to have intelligent children, obviously your cognition, so focus on this first year of life. Another thing is also the pregnancy nutrition. So this particular article spoke about the pregnancy nutrition. So when you have a small for gestational age baby, which was born say around 35 weeks gestation or above, these children who are born small, these children have a lower neurodevelopmental assessment by 0.5 standard deviation. Okay, and if babies who are born even below 35 weeks, so if babies who are born premature, and even those premature babies are small for gestational age, they had even poorer neurodevelopmental assessment. So this article basically tells you the importance of pregnancy nutrition. Bring those birth weights up. I keep telling, even in India, 2.7 birth weight is pathetic. We have to have 2.3, 2.5, why not higher, to 3.5 kg. Those children are definitely, they do well in neurodevelopmental assessment. Now, another article which I really like is about critical period of brain growth. Now, this article was published in Journal Brain in 2004. And what they did, basically, they monitored about 221 children. They did the head circumference of this 221 children in a longitudinal study where basically they examined the head circumference through ultrasound at 18 weeks of gestation, at birth, and then they basically remeasured that at 9 months of age. And what they found, the head circumference and gestation when the baby was in the womb and at birth had no correlation to IQ at 9 years of age. But the head circumference at 9 months of age, those babies who had a higher head circumference, they had a higher IQ at 9 years of age. So basically what this article mentioned is the brain growth during infancy and early childhood is more important than the the growth during fetal life, because you have a window of opportunity to improve your cognition, improve your head circumference from 0 months to up to, I would say, 9 months of age. So this is your time to really act and, help our children grow beautifully. Now, this particular graph is basically from NFHS 4, where it shows the age-wise nutrition status of India. So if you look at your 0 to 2 months, so your red line is your, So your red line is your wasting, your yellow line is your stunting, and your blue line is your underweight. So as your, and you can see the children are born wasted, and 0 to 2 months of age, there's 34% children who are wasted. Wasted means your acute malnutrition, your severe acute malnutrition and moderate acute malnutrition. And there is no improvement, not at all. There is hardly any improvement in first 6 months of life. So all those babies who are wasted, they stay wasted. And eventually what happens, the underweight, there is no improvement in underweight. Stunting is going up a little bit higher and higher. So again, there is a tremendous amount of growth failure occurring in first 6 months of age. So child is sliding down. And then at 7 to 12 months of age, the quality of diet that we have in India is extremely poor in complementary feeding. And boom, what you see after 1 year of age, look at the rise in your stunting, your underweight, your SAM is improving because acute malnutrition, your SAM, is getting, it's being masked by your stunting, because stunted children have a lower weight. Okay, so this I'd say that all this acute malnutrition being masked because of poor height. So this is very important stage in especially for India and other developing countries, that we have extremely important growth monitoring in first 1 year of life. Now,
Dr.
what
Rupal,
are the yeah?
if I may, you have 5 minutes left of a
Okay.
3.5 hour lecture.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so now the effect of nutrition insecurity, mainly, of course, your anthropometric failure, but also your developmental problems, emotional problems, behavior problems. In adolescent, we find a higher risk of suicidal and dysthymia. So under 6 months of age babies, what is elephant in the room? What do a 6 months old babies, under 6 months old baby need to have? It's basically, just breast milk, nothing else. And you can see from a lot of this articles, that there is a tremendous amount of breastfeeding failure occurring not only in developing country, but even in developed country. So here 92% of the mothers had at least one or the other breastfeeding concern, and most of them gave up breastfeeding by day 14. And here there's another article which was published on 2000. Basically they examined about 2,500 mothers, and almost half of them gave up. And then final number was about 1,100 mothers, and they found that most of the mothers had this issue of breastfeeding failure, and they stopped breastfeeding by 8 months of age. So here, this is the issue of breastfeeding failure. Now, if you look at the world data, and I really appreciate Dr. Devaji to give me all these slides, as just amazing slides. What ideally we want all our children to have a proper breastfeeding. But if you look at the real data, look at the breastfeeding rate all over the world. It starts only around say 45%, 50%, and it goes down. And all these children are at very high risk of developing, if not undernutrition, then probably because of formula, these children become obese and have metabolic syndrome later on in life. And if you look at NFHS data over the last, from 1 to NFHS 4 data, there is not much improvement in uptake of breastfeeding. Look at this, all these slopes going down by 6 months of age. All these children, basically mothers are kind of giving up on breastfeeding, and nothing has changed. So if there is a breastfeeding failure, this is it. The ideal, the current, nothing has changed. And essentially, this is the story of IICF, specifically on breastfeeding, and then of course complementary feeding also. This is again NFHS 4 data. You can see exclusive breastfeeding rate going down, and whereas exclusive breastfeeding they go down, you can see the SAM. These are the weight for height SAM data of a country, and pretty much good number of children are SAM under 6 months of age. So moral of the story is, the more we do the same, the more we remain static. And we have to basically have a creative disruption in first 6 months of age, and of course in 6 months to 12 months of age. And unless we do that, we will not be able to see improvement in our children. And is disruption possible under 6 months of age? Yes, of course. How? Which I will talk later in my presentation, which is coming up 20th. But just quickly, last few slides. Effective breastfeeding skills, which Professor Agnihotri mentioned, not only exclusive, but effective breastfeeding skills is very, very important. And here at Sitara, we have developed cross-cradle hold with 45 point of counseling tutorials, which have shown amazing results, which I will discuss in my next session. These are the cross-cradle hold, which is completely opposite of cradle hold that traditionally we have been using. And there is a logic behind each and every step of 45 points. And this is a disruption. This is called disruption. This is 6 months old girl child. Look at the weight, 9.67 just by breast milk. And look at the height of this child, tall, 97 percentile. for this child. This is a boy child, 10 kg at 6 months of age, 10 child. Now this child, boy child, has tremendous appetite. And if I tell mother, give this food, give that nutrient dense food, this child is never going to be undernourished. And also considering the IQ, look at the head circumference. You can make out the babies who grow well in 6 months, they definitely have much higher, good head circumference. And one of the results which just came out last week, which I showed to my students, and this is the gain in length with cross-cradle hold, and this is in weeks. So look at in just 4 weeks or 5 weeks, look at the length going up. These are the percentile growth chart. Look at how fast child is growing, not only weight-wise, and this is another child, girl child at 6 months of age. Look at how tall this child is. So this is what we are mentioning. And for complementary feeding stage, once those babies are, and this is our Anna Prasham festival, which is occurring, in India, that at 6 months of age, at the completion of 6 months of age, children are brought, in one place, and they are started this complementary food. But you know that when children are really well nourished or well kind of robust, their appetite is so good that they take whatever you give them, and this is again, the dietary diversity is a big issue all over the world, and it's an issue again in India too. The concept of type 1, type 2 nutrients are really important, which is again shown by Dr. Michael Golden. And according to him, basically we required 40 nutrients in a diet. Okay, these are essential. And he has divided them into type 1 and type 2 nutrients. Type 1s are basically mainly your vitamins and some of the minerals like calcium, iron. Your type 2 nutrients are your proteins, your fat, your potassium, sulfur, magnesium that nobody talks about. Nobody talks about magnesium, potassium, but those are as important as your protein and your omega-3, omega-6. And the difference is that type 1 nutrients basically function only in certain metabolic functions or certain biochemical functions. They are stored in the body. By and large, they're stored in the body. So you don't need it in the diet on a day-to-day basis because they are by and large stored. Type 2 nutrients are basically they're required for the whole biochemical metabolic functions. Basically, they're required in more than 100 plus biochemical reaction in the body. All your organs, your tissue, your muscles, they're made up of this. Okay, and since it is not stored in the body, we require it on a day-to-day basis. And if you don't have this nutrients in children's diet, what will happen? All these nutrients will come from their own muscle mass, and that's why they have wasting. And at the longer period of time, the wasted children, they have stunting also. Okay, so that if you want to prevent stunting, you work on this type 2 nutrients from 6 months of age. And this is again just a picture of functional nutrients. So in functional nutrients, like for example, if the patient has iron deficiency, you can see from the symptoms, you can do biochemical test, you can do blood test, you can give medicine and they get better. These are the growth nutrient deficiency, where children need growth nutrients to grow, otherwise they'll become thin, they will become short, they will have MUOC, which will be lower. And again, for me, macronutrients, children required good amount of first-class protein to grow muscles, bones, and other organs, while they require good fats for the brain and energy. A complex carbohydrate, which is rich in fiber, are important for gut microbiome and some minerals and vitamins. So I do focus on all my children on good quality protein and good fats. And these are again protein-rich foods, some seeds, which are, we tell by mothers, if they're buying pumpkin, don't throw away those seeds, are extremely high in type 2 nutrients, zinc, magnesium, potassium, all that. These are all good fats, omega-3 rich foods, your zinc, which we know. So this is all nutrient-dense food. Focus on this nutrient-dense food, and you will eliminate malnutrition. If you have to come out of just rice and wheat and those just cereals. And of course, my colleague is going to talk about all that. So I'm going to end. Just again, complementary foods. Not only dietary diversity is important, but also how much quantity, frequency. All that is important. These are some of the nutrient powders that we have created. Which are homemade. Mothers can make it at home. These are very high behind type 1 as well as type 2 nutrients. And further detailed programmatic discussion, I will do it on 20th September, okay? Because I have a lot of data to present. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rupal. Thank you very much. I know it is very difficult for you to give this talk in such a short time, because this is just for information of the audience. Dr. Rupal can take actually a 3-hour class on the same topic without any. We have this limitation of time, and as she said, Dr. Ratna will be speaking about the complementary feeding part of it. Dr. Rupal focused more on the requirement of the children and the need for breastfeeding. I think by now the participants who mostly have background from food and agriculture would have realized that nutrition security requires something much more than just the food security. And I think if this message goes through, it will be useful. Of course, we will share all this material with you, because your colleagues may not believe you and they may want to argue with you. So you should be able to get the relevant literature for you. I think we will take a couple of questions. There's already a question from Syria. I think Dr. Mohammed, would you please ask your question?
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you, Doctor, for your good presentation. I have one question. Is industrial milk is good for children in the first 2 years of age?
Sorry?
Thank you very much. Is industrial milk powder is good for children in the first 2 years of the age?
No, absolutely. You're talking about the formulas, right? Infant formulas?
Because some women couldn't make feeding, so they replace the food for their children with industrial milk, powder of industrial milk.
Yeah. No. So
is good or not?
No, it's not good at all, because this powder milk has sugar, it has refined oils, it is ultra processed food, right? And if you look at the breast milk constitution and your or composition or formula, it's quite varied. So there is nothing like another thing is breast milk is a live milk. Live milk means it has a lot of antibodies, it has macrophages, it has cells which fights the infection. Okay. Now, when you buy formula, formula doesn't have those live products. I mean, it does not have macrophages, it doesn't have all these immune cells, it does not fight infection. Plus, it is ultra processed, it is made in the factory. Right? So it has a lot of, in fact, we are coming up with a tutorial where we have shown the difference between breast milk and the formula milk or the powder milk, and what problem can it cause or can create in babies. Because what we have seen in babies, because I work in US, and in US also the breastfeeding rate is extremely poor. Okay, so what we are seeing in US, and all these babies, they have eczema, they have allergies, they have asthma, they have obesity, they put on too much of weight, and do we want those unhealthy babies? Not at all, because our goal is just not immediate health, our goal is lifelong health. Correct. So I definitely am so against formulas. I mean, in very, very few, I would say 1 in maybe 1,000 babies, if there is an issue, I may think of giving formula. But with our proper breastfeeding techniques, with 45 pounds of counseling, that not enough breast milk has gone out of the window. All mothers, they get it. It's nature's food. Very few conditions, very, very few situations that I had to give formula. So I hope that answered your question.
There's one more question by Hamad Raza.
Thank you.
Ask your question, please.
Yeah, I have one question, if you permit me, ma'am.
We will permit you after Hamad asks this question.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to ask, that was a nice presentation and very informative for us. Secondly, my question is that as you say that powder milk is not good for the babies and like that, but if that is not good, there are many brands in the market, even that in the international brands in all the countries, especially in India and Pakistan. Then why doctors recommended these powder milk for the babies?
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. I totally understand what you're saying, because I come from that medical background where we did not have too much knowledge on breastfeeding. Our focus was very much on therapeutic medicine. Therapeutic medicine means, okay, baby's not gaining weight, do something. What do you do? Because we had no training on breastfeeding techniques. We did not have all that important understanding. So for doctors, if child is sick, you give medicine. If child is not gaining weight, give formulas. And this is true even in India. So I'm struggling with a lot of doctors, because without understanding the importance of breastfeeding and technicality, they're giving formulas left, right, and center. So that we need to fight. We need to now basically take this kind of understanding from not top to bottom, from bottom to top, and teach mothers proper techniques so that they have enough breast milk, babies grow well. And that I will talk about it on my 20th, when I'm talking on 20th. But I'll go detail about the technicality and how we can basically kind of eliminate formulas. Formula have a $70 billion turnover. Formula making companies. Why would they allow mothers to breastfeed?
Yes, you're right. But even I see even at my home, when the babies are not healthy, even that they have some problem like constipation or motion problem, usually in every home, doctor recommend the powder milk.
Yeah.
Not the
And
cow
then
milk.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, they don't understand. Yeah, they don't understand that the cow milk, that formulas are made from cow milk. Okay. Now, cow milk is very prone for causing constipation. Cow milk is very prone for causing a lot of problems in a baby's gut. Like bleeding in gut, blood in stools, so many issues. So I wish, and I'm hoping that our tutorials will be shown to those doctors to understand what problems it can cause in babies, and then understand the technicality of breastfeeding with 45 points across the whole, and hopefully it will help.
Dr. Rupal, I think we are already discussing with AARDO. In fact, when I mentioned to them that our tutorials are available even in Arabic and Persian, AARDO is interested in a separate training of doctors or pediatricians with you that we will take up subsequently. But I think let's move to...
Yes, I think we need to start the campaigns or awareness among the mothers.
Yeah, I think Hamad, if you hold your fire till Dr. Arun Gupta comes for talking, I think he and Dr. Rupal will together probably provide part of the answer to your question.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we have from Omar Hassan, you had a question.
Yes. First of all, good afternoon for you. Thank you, Doctor, for that informative lecture. My first question is about the kind of milk that you prefer for the children, because which we have in our countries. I don't think that it's an illusion or it's a fact. Some people prefer the milk of goats in compare with the milk of cows. Which one it's probably considered is better for the children? The second is about the cereal. From the minerals and fats that you showed previously, I don't know which one is suitable for the children that in our countries to be focused on. For example, this groundnuts, sorghum, and a lot of things that can be given for the children. In which age? I'm just about the age which is suitable age that people should have to give their children this kind of cereal.
Yeah. So basically what I recommend, and again, coming from a lot of our data and evidence, that we prefer the children after completion of 6 months, and that is the recommendation given by WHO. After completion of 6 months, you can start protein-rich food first. Protein-rich food, right? So start with pulses first. Start with your beans first. You have amazing kind of beans, and then add. Once you start protein, once you start some yogurt, some I won't say dairy, but dairy product like yogurt is very good for the gut microbiome. And then you will start adding millets, as you said. Sorghum is very good. Other millets, proso is good. In India we get other millets. So start with millets rather than rice, because rice is unfortunately it is processed rice. White rice is predominantly starch. Hardly anything is there. Rather than that, you start with fiber-rich, sorghum and all that, and then you start adding, eggs, your meats, your fish. You can start from 6 months of age, And believe me, there is a beautiful study which is done in New England Journal of Medicine, and they found that children who were started on all this different kind of food early on, say by 6 months of age, those children had lesser allergies at 1 year of age. So babies who were started food later on, say after 9 months, 10 months, those baby had high number of allergies, especially peanut, because in the US we have a lot of peanut allergy, right? So they now recommend that don't wait for 8 months, 9 months, start as soon as possible, So that's what my recommendation is too.
Yeah, I would suggest this is a topic which will have lots of questions and it will take a longish time. So if the audience permits, I think because Professor Ratna actually covers that part of the IICF. If you permit, Professor Rupal, what we could do is we can circulate the spoken tutorial videos, both on breastfeeding as well as on complementary feeding, which are there in English. And breastfeeding, we can even circulate the Arabic and Persian one. So let the audience go through it so that when they come on Monday, some of them will have probably more questions, and then we can probably have a separate group which discusses that.
Right.
So I think that would be a good strategy, because we also have to look at the issue of time. So I think what I will do is, thank you very much for sparing your time at this hour. I don't know what's the time in the morning, is it 3 o'clock?
3, yeah.
3 in the morning. So I think you are welcome to stay for Ratna's presentation, or you are free to leave as well.
Yeah,
I'll
stay.
I'll request Dr. Ratna to give a presentation, briefly introducing Dr. Ratna. She is part of this organizing team also. She is a public health nutritionist with more than 30 years of experience. She is a research director in a famous college of home science in Mumbai, Nirmala Niketan. She is also technical consultant to us. She has been the course creator and academic advisor of a 1-year certificate course in SOFA Women's Research Center. There are various other things to her credit. She will talk about some of the questions that were asked now about when to feed and what to feed. The reason why we specifically brought this issue of child nutrition in this workshop, I mean, people would not have thought about it normally, is because this is a constituency which is very important, and they will be the building blocks for the future. So we have to be sensitive towards their need now. So that is the reason why we had this presentation by Robert, and then Rupal, and then Professor Ratna. So over to Professor Ratna. And what we will also do is we will circulate to you 2 policy briefs which actually show you the importance of breastfeeding during the pandemic period, because I think the early breastfeeding, the colostrum is a immunity provider and breast milk is an immunity booster. So if God has given some medicine for the children through the mother in the first 3 years of life, and these are the children who are not going to get vaccine, I think we must focus on this. So therefore we have brought in this topic. But now over to Professor Ratna for what do you do after the child is 6 months old, and is it very difficult? Is it rocket science to give nutritious food? She will give you the answer. So over to Professor Ratna.
Thank you, Satish sir, and thank you, Dr. Rupal, for setting the platform for me. In fact, I'm just going to share my, can you all see my PowerPoint?
Yes, you
Okay,
can.
I'll make it full screen.
Yeah, and you have 15 minutes, Dr. Ratna. I think that should be fine.
Yes, 15 minutes. Okay. Basically, what I'm looking at and what I want to take off from where Dr. Rupal has ended her talk is I want everybody to think that complementary food is not just giving grain. So that's why my topic is beyond cereals and simple ways to tackle micronutrient gap. Now, this is what I am looking at in this, my presentation is I'm looking at what is the THR, take home ration story. I was currently working on a paper also, so I got a lot of information from there and a lot of insights, which I want to share with you. This take home ration is given to through the ICDS, our largest government scheme, ICDS, Integrated Child Development Services. And this take home ration is something that is given to pregnant, lactating, as well as from 6 months to 3 years. So I'll be dealing with some of these topics, something that I have done myself at my level. That is what I call as superfoods and food, what I mean by food to food fortification. Since I work in certain tribal areas, I want to share with you the indigenous plants and of course, the use of digital media and certain school nutrition programs that I have helped develop. Basically, what I have done is when I see this ICDS food, the take-home rations, the take-home ration basically is given the same amount is given whether you are a 6 months baby or you are a 3-year-old child. So according to me, the child who is 6 months have different nutritional requirements, and if you are going to give him the same quota of food, same ration as a 3-year-old child, then there is going to be some discrepancy who is actually eating that food. So that is, I'm giving it to all, I want to put it to all people who are involved with any kind of policy making. Okay, please look at the requirements for a 6 months old child, how much you should be giving, what is the proportion of your supplementary nutrition, and whether if you are doing it like a, like a flat system, okay, 6 months to 3 years, everybody gets the same. Please understand, all this ration costs taxpayers' money, and you should be utilizing it wisely. This is my take on it. And what I have found is that though the calories and the protein norms are much more, they are required, they are met. Calories and proteins on paper, they are met. Please understand what I'm trying to say. On paper, how much is given? The quota 80 grams to 150 grams of whether it's a premix, whether it is a ration of cereals, pulses, grains, etc. When you calculate it, it is met. Protein calories are met. Now, what the problem comes is that then why is the malnutrition happening? What is the problem? My question to everybody is that means if it's all being met, you shouldn't be having a problem. So why, where is it coming from? This is what I want to explain to all of you, that when we looked at these, my observations were that the micronutrients, certain micronutrients like B6, B12 and vitamin D, they were missing. And many of the type 1, type 2 nutrients that Rupal pointed out were also missing. And we realized that there are some, how would you say, states that prefer giving eggs, and there are some states that look, I will not agree to giving eggs to children. Okay, so eggs is I mean, whether it is a political decision or a cultural decision, means that needs to be debated. But what happens is that when you're giving eggs twice a week and when you're giving a cereal pulse combination only, so the quality of that protein, because it's a cereal pulse and not a non-vegetarian protein, so the quality of the cereal pulse, the essential amino acids, is not going to be on par. And how much you need to eat, how much that child needs to eat. If he is a SAM or a MAM child, how much he will eat? That question also, there are no consumption studies that are done. How much does a SAM child eat? How much does a MAM child eat? How much does a normal child eat? No consumption studies are done. So you're merely giving quota of rations. So, I mean, you all need to think about it. And in this COVID situation, like right now, last 1 year back, since many states give hot lunch, a full meal for either pregnant lactating mothers or even children, that had to stop. So they started giving cereals, grains. You understood, that is pulses. They started giving iodized salt. They started giving some spices. They started giving items like grocery items. They started giving. Now, with the hope, I mean, I hope the infant did get some of it. The pregnant lactating mother did get some of it, but the situation, our COVID situation only was such that many people lost their jobs. Many people couldn't go out to work. I mean, there was a lot of economic turmoil also happening at the same time. So the vulnerable groups in that, did they really get this amount of quota? I mean, how much did they get? And vegetables, okay, they gave vegetables, but what were the vegetables that were given? That is basically potato. So, I mean, something has to be done. Why something needs to be done is because the sugar and jaggery, what they were giving, is far higher. I mean, sometimes I mean, you get frightened at the amount of sugar and jaggery that is given. And this is given, yes, you can compensate the calories and all that thought process is okay. But is that really needed by the child? And vegetable oil is given. So that means you are giving omega-3? Yes? No, you're giving omega-6. So this is something that some kind of percentages that would be helpful to you. This is what I wanted to tell you. The calories, proteins are good, but the digestible amino acid content is a big question mark in the THR. Now, what I did from my side, okay, this was my introduction part. Now, what I did, I want to introduce you all to a concept so you all can do it in your own country. See, in our country, the Indian food composition tables are being published, and these Indian food has a variety of foods that are across eaten. Maybe much more can be added, but that are across eaten in our country. So what I did as a academician, I took those food composition tables and then I assembled them. I chose 34 nutrients I was interested in, and I assembled them in the highest in descending order, from the highest to the lowest, and then I made a cutoff. This is an exercise I did academically with my 2 students and my 2 colleagues. In fact, I should have mentioned them earlier, who have grossly supported me in whatever I have done is Aarti Jain and Reema Ved. They are also on this meeting. So what these girls did, Aarti did for me and Reema, they kind of selected, and you'll be surprised to see what came out. My top runners, the ones that were popping up all the time in the first 50, I found, okay, dry nuts are there. Yes, dry nuts are there. But groundnuts were there. And according to me, yes, peanut allergy is a thing, what Rupal said maybe in America. But I personally, in my 30 years, not really come across anybody, maybe I've missed them, with a groundnut allergy, what we call as shengdana in our language. And I found coconut. These were popping up. So why can't we why can't we identify certain foods in this manner in our own country, of our own ethnic group? We found certain fish. And I want to particularly say, in my tribal belt, Bombay duck. I mean, I know it's called Bombay duck. It's not a duck. It's a fish. And the dried form is very frequently eaten by tribals and other varieties of dry fish. Now, fish is something, when you dry it, even the bones can be eaten. So the whole thing can be eaten. It's not like only the flesh is eaten. So why can't you identify certain easily available fish that you can promote in your literature, you can promote in your counseling? So this is what I saw also. These are prawns of various sizes. I'm not going to speak about them. They are just from our list. We found certain vegetables popping up, leafy vegetables. And I will tell you about curry leaves. I love that curry leaves. Curry leaves is something that it grows widely in our country from north to south. And curry leaves is something that you get, you go to the bazaar also, people really don't have any value for curry leaves. And its addition can be a game changer to the complementary foods. Fenugreek leaves, that what we call methi, drumstick leaves, what is called as moringa, and certain locally available leaves that is what has shown up in my list. Of course, non-veg, liver, organ meat definitely showed up besides the meat, and egg, and when I say condensed, we call it khoya, we boil it down, and of course cow's milk, and pulses. My God, I loved these pulses. Why? Because right from the black-eyed beans or the horse gram or the red gram or the soya bean or what we call kidney beans or rajma, all these beans popped up. And of course, amaranth. Amaranth is what we call in our language Rajgira. We found this popping up, and amaranth is eaten. It is eaten in the seed form. You puff it up and you can eat it. And it is one of what I call was in my top rankers. A lot of seeds came, garden cress seeds, sesame seeds, till as we call them, sesame seeds, white, black sesame seeds, Niger seeds, sunflower. You have to, what my purpose of showing you all this is, you must try to do this exercise and identify your front-running nutrients, front-running ingredients, and front-running in many nutrients. I found turmeric. Do you know turmeric is one of the good sources of iron, and obviously coriander and all this what we call as garam masala. This is something that I want to go forward with, is why can't we use food to food, means using ingredients and then putting it in staple diets of infant foods, of anemic women foods, of pregnant lactating mothers. This is a simple example. I know Rupal said rice. In our country, rice is highly polished. You can use even millets. But I have done this particular exercise. I did this with a product called khichdi. It's a cereal pulse combination. And in the first shot, I just added in 100 grams cooked, like while cooking, 30 grams, that is 15 grams of tur and rice, 100 grams cooked amount comes. And we just added 1/4 teaspoon of curry leaves powder. And this curry leaves powder is dry curry leaves powder. It is very easy to make. And just look what popped up, what increased: beta carotene, calcium, and omega-3. Just look what happens when I just added not only curry leaf powder, I added even my nuts and seeds powder. You'll find a whole spoken tutorial of IIT on it. And why I'm showing it in red is because I'm not nutritionally, percentage wise, given it to you, but just to show you these two, just addition of these two powders could improve the diet of the child. The recipe, the nutritive value. Going ahead, I want to show you about our indigenous plants. Now, why am I talking of indigenous plants? First of all, they come bumper crop in season time, and people don't really have to pay too much money for them. Sometimes it grows in the areas where they live. So, but many people, they are now looking away from these indigenous plants and looking towards food products that are marketed very easily. So what we call as forest or run utsavs or festivals of forest vegetables. Don't identify in your own country which are your forest vegetables that grow in abundance and are cost effective. And these are some of the examples that I got from a forest festival of of vegetables, of forest produce. And this is to show you, one of my students went one step forward. We thought of giving employment to our, thinking of employment opportunities. And we tried to bring out value added products out of these forest vegetables. But the need of the hour is communication. Why I'm asking for this communication? Because you can create the best recipes, you can have the best forest vegetables, you can have the best rations, but until you communicate this to the can you communicate this information, and whether you communicate it to your field workers, to your trainers, your beneficiaries, or even school children, the communication should be given importance. As I was just discussing, that very often counseling and communication is given, obviously delivery of production and supply chain and everything else is given a lot of importance. At the end of it, the chain, the beneficiary must be told that this is good for your health. But that communication is not really highlighted by anybody, because you may, it's like you can give food to the person. You give him food, you give him everything, you give him ration, you give him everything. But what will help in long run? Help in long run is you teach the man how to fish. You teach the man how to fend for himself, how to cook. And this is something that I am looking for, is nutrition sensitizing, food to food fortification, empowering our beneficiaries. Now, why I'm showing you this dietary diversity table over here. This dietary diversity table, I want you to take this, do little studies in your own country and find out are these 9 food groups being met by either the complementary food or the pregnant lactating mother or the adolescent girls. Just look at these. There are 9. There are, of course, 12 categories in household dietary diet, 9 categories. Of those 9, at least 6. I mean, it's pathetic. You have 3, you have 4. I am asking 6 food groups and more should be met. Ideally, I'd love it if all 9 food groups are met. And how they can be done? Very simple techniques. Micronutrients can reach by you.
Sir Ratna, I think you will have a couple of minutes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Couple of minutes. I'm looking at kitchen gardens. I'm looking at microgreen production at the home. I'm looking at diet diversity this is an Indian thali, obviously, but I'm looking at these combinations, cereal or millet, sprout, in one recipe, because a person cannot eat everything at one time. So look at healthy combinations of food groups and bring more than 3 or possibly 4 food groups together. Now, why I'm flashing this? I'm flashing it because our nutrition program, what we want to achieve with my colleagues Aarti and Rima is, and with the help of a digital, I mean, we can't do it alone. In a pandemic world, we are trying to go digital, eating the right food at the right time, in the right combination. And this is something which is the website. I'd like you all to look at it. It is by Professor, it's a brainchild, I must say, of Professor Jitendra Shah, and he's got a very able colleague, Monica Shah. And I would like you to look at this website. I've given we are planning to do peer-to-peer conversations, training of school children, of adolescent girls, of any beneficiary we can touch. And also I have, last but not the least, I want to show, I put the website, the YouTube link here. I have developed a couple of years ago, going through the school syllabus, mind you, programs of nutrition in the subject of maths, in the subject of language, in subject of art, and obviously science. So thank you very much, Aarti, Rima, for your constant support, without whom this presentation, I mean, this is so much of work that we have done over the years. And definitely my acknowledgements to Professor Jitendra Shah and Monica Shah, who have enabled their brainchild, and we are the content, and we want to reach out to as many people. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Ratna. I think that was very, very well done. I think there was a question from Cambodia, what do we do if rice is a staple food? I think you practically answered that. We will take a couple of questions, and then I will seek everybody's permission to take 10 more minutes for a short presentation, which will be useful for you. That will close our session correctly. So are there any hands up? I think Omar Hassan, that is an old hand. So we do not seem to have questions on chat box either. Everybody is saying basic information, nice information, thank you. So we will give you the details of this website, but we will have a question from Professor Narendra Shah. And in the meantime, I'll ask Dr. Dripta to be ready for her short presentation. Yeah, Professor Narendra Shah.
Yeah, good afternoon to everybody. I'm not sure if Robert of Unicef is around, but if Robert is not there, maybe either Professor Satish could take this question, or any of the speakers could. See, just a few days back, one of the organizer, our own colleague at Sitara, Professor Parmeshwar, pointed me to a book which says why there's a certain lobby which loves drought, that, droughts should sustain. So there's a book which he referred to. So like that, in certain corners or certain, there is a lobby which somehow intends to see that malnutrition should not end. I mean, what are your thoughts on this, either Robert or Professor Satish?
Yeah, Robert is not there. This is a question which will go slightly away from our topic, but yes, I think there are people who are looking forward to making profit out of malnutrition. That is exactly, and the question which our friend had asked earlier about the formula milk being recommended by the doctors is essentially a game of commerce. So just as some people will love that malnutrition remains so that they can be in business, I think it will be our duty to ensure that malnutrition goes. They can do some other business. I think that should be fine. I'll move to Radhika Gupta's question, and the book that you are referring to is Sainath's book called Everybody Loves a Good Drought.
Yes.
Okay, Radhika, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Ratna, my question is on food to fork fortification. So in terms of using kitchen gardens or microgreens, has that model been tested in urban slums where there is space constraint?
There is huge lack of space in urban areas, and we are promoting microgreens. I would call it windowsill farming. I mean, I wouldn't call it actually kitchen gardens or anything like that, but we are, our nutrition team is definitely promoting the growth of, in small boxes or small containers. You can take wheat, you can take any grain you want, you can take any pulse, you can take fenugreek seeds, you can take cumin seeds. There's a whole information that you can have these microgreens growing, like how you grow plants in your house on your balcony. We are trying to promote this, and this has to catch on, because if you have to give fresh green leafy vegetables, I mean, and if you don't get it, it's best is you try to use your available space and if you are interested in your child's health, do grow it, however small quantity it is. And it'll be a good habit. It'll probably, if one parent is doing, it'll probably catch on. And you teach children how to do it, I'm sure they will carry the...
Dr. Ratna, this question came up for us because of the focus on rural areas. We consciously did not bring in a question of urban, urban greens, urban microgreens. Otherwise, Dr. Chandrasekhar Biradar from Egypt, I think he is on urban agriculture. He is quite an expert. But then since the AARDO program was focusing on rural, we cut it out.
Yeah.
What I would suggest, Radhika, is that you can have an offline conversation with Dr. Ratna, and she actually has some good program. And if you want to take it up in your area, we'll be more than happy to help out. But I think let me use the chairman's prerogative and put the time Kalitun. I'll quickly request Dr. Dutta to give you a glimpse of some literature which has come in the context of pandemic, because again, let us remember what yesterday Dr. Khetrapal and Dr. Yang said. They said, don't use the word post-pandemic because this pandemic is going to stay for some time. So Dr. Dutta has picked up some good literature. She will give you a brief glimpse in about 5 to 8 minutes, and then we'll share all this literature with you. So over to you, Dr. Dutta. The floor is yours.
Thank you so
about
much.
6 to 8 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share different dimensions of food and nutrition security studies done during the COVID-19 pandemic and lessons learned. Throughout today's session, we have learned about the nutrition and food security. Now let's see how pandemic has played with it. Food and nutrition security are mediated through enabled food environment, which are determined by availability, accessibility, affordability, acceptability, and agency. If anyone wants to study the effect of any incident, be it pandemic or natural calamity or any political emergency on food and nutrition security, it needs to look for displacement or distortion happen for each of these factors, maybe at national or regional or interpersonal level, depending upon the situation want to study about. Here, I would like to present a few studies conducted in various developing countries, and we can see how these determinant factors play the role. This study, published this year in World Development, surveyed 442 respondents from Kenya and Uganda during peak phase of pandemic-related national lockdown. The proportion of food insecure respondents increased by 38% in Kenya and 44% in Uganda, which was mediated by disturbed regular income due to various reasons, from reduced business activities to its complete shutdown. Fluctuation in food imports and regional market, leading to increase in food prices and increased burden by stopped free school meals, made the situation even more difficult. In order to cope with a stressful situation, changing dietary pattern has come on food forth. And it appeared as a first strategy to compromise on, such as consuming less diverse diets, skipping meals, and reduced portions of food. Especially intake of fruits and vegetables were found to be compromised. 60% respondents in both the countries normally used to consume fruits at least 10 times a month, whereas less than 30% did so during pandemic. Authors suggested that government responses should focus on A, structural changes in social security by developing responsive packages to cushion members pushed into poverty by such pandemics, and B, ensuring the resilience of food supply chains, particularly of nutrient-dense foods like fruits and vegetables. Similar observation on income reduction was observed in Bangladesh, where over 70% of the household income was reduced, which showed significant negative association with household dietary diversity score and household food security score. This situation resulted in deterioration of dietary quality. About 45% and 61% Bangladesh households did not get the same quantity and same type of food, respectively, like they used to consume before pandemic. In the study, rural households were found to have lower diversity and security scores than urban. On the contrary, this study, having one site in urban Dhaka and another site in rural Chandpur district, reported almost similar incidents of mild to moderate food insecurity in rural and urban, although severe food insecurity was higher in urban with 42% than 15% in rural. About 1/3 of the rural households adopted both financial and food compromisation related coping strategies, but urban households reacted differently. Nearly 71% urban households adopted both types of coping strategies. Interestingly, a total of 42 households did not adopt any coping strategies at all. Out of these 42 households, 19 were food secure, 13 were mildly, and 10 were moderately food insecure households. That means nearly 48% of the mildly food insecure and 10% of moderately food insecure households did not adopt any coping strategies. And only a few of those households, 28 out of 212 households, received any help from the government or non-government organizations or any relatives during the lockdown period. That means they just did not take any strategy and remain food insecure. This study has shown different strata of socioeconomic status adopted different coping strategies, which might result in long-term economic and nutritional consequences. Hence, any food relief or financial support should be allocated to the households, keeping these characteristics in mind. We have already seen how socioeconomic status affected food security level. This study in Mexico not only reiterates the association, but it also highlights the mental health fact associated with food insecurity. Inverse relationship between food security and anxiety was reported here, where persons living in food secure households report fewer anxiety symptoms than persons living in food insecure households. This study is from Maharashtra state of India, the worst affected state in India, having active cases of more than 6,500 on average and more than 24,000 maximum daily active cases at one point. And Nagpur was one of the COVID-19 hotspots in central India. This study was done in Nagpur. When perception was asked from city residents during initial and peak phase of lockdown, food and grocery was identified as second immediate concern because of closing and shifting of vegetable wholesale markets, disruption of supply chain of food grains and groceries. Though 70% respondents maintained adequate stock of food grains and groceries, availability and market prices were very critical for issues from food insecurity in the households. Quality of the foods were also found to be deteriorated due to disrupted supply chain and stock clearance by shopkeepers. Unsurety of food supply and affordability to buy were also perceived strongly. So fruits and vegetables, meat, poultry market disruption threats the nutrition security. This study also looked into the government mechanisms taken up to support the situation. In order to implementing Epidemic Disease Act 1987, major public places, gathering, movements, markets had to be closed. The Agriculture Produce Market Committee here at Kalamna, the biggest wholesale market for grains and vegetables in the city, which distributes the commodities all over the city, was also closed. Disrupted transportation, reduction in supply, closure of wholesale market, shortage of labor in the market, increase in retail market prices started making the situation difficult both for farmers and buyers. A sense of insecurity for livelihood prevailed among the farmers and traders, as there were no clear directions and alternatives for the civic authorities for making the sale. Thereafter, to maintain a continued supply of food produce with safety precautions, the local authorities took 3 key initiatives. In coordination with APMC, the city authorities designed 24 open ground in different parts of the city as alternative locations to carry out the sale transaction between traders and associated farmers. Community kitchens and shelter homes were also set up. Door-to-door delivery of food products was initiated by local authorities, partnering with 50 food produce organizations of small and medium farmers registered under various government schemes.
I'm afraid you need to wind up in a couple of minutes.
It's done, sir. 2 more slides. We also took up a study using qualitative research methodology to explore the culinary behaviors of Indian households, food gatekeepers during COVID-19 pandemic. This study is under review and which interviewed 34 women from different communities in Mumbai. Being the different socioeconomic strata, this study reflected different food behavior pattern than we have seen from the other context. Experimentation in the kitchen, increase in snacking and overall food intake have given a different perspective of food choices and behaviors, which may widen the double burden of malnutrition, and long-term studies required to look for such consequences. If we look for the disadvantageous population like tribal communities, another perspective will appear where those cereals will be available, but availability of other nutritive foods will be critical. 78% reported having 1 or more vegetables, but mainly of roots and tubers. Only 34% had 1 or more nutritive value-added things like vegetables and fruits. And farm marketplace, no public transport, disruption in supply chain to shop, and first running out supply at shops lead to increase in food price by 30 to 50%. And that brought the accessibility and affordability at stake. Age-old buttering system also reappeared when wheat was used for the recent harvest to buy items. Families which were not able to trade their wheat survived on a mainly cereal pulse based together with a small amount of spices, most often chilies and garlic. So lessons learned from these experiences is decentralization of the market, and the emphasis of local growing instead depending on the wholesale market is very important to ensure the sustainability. Linking local growers to consumers through online platform for the benefits at both sides of buyer and farmers are also important. Supportive strategy has to be planned differentially for urban and rural as food security issues and coping strategies are very much different for these 2 spectrums. Focused policy directions on food and nutrition security for disadvantageous population like tribal population or migrant communities is also needed. Nutrient inadequacy among lower socioeconomic group and opting wrong food choices in affluent population may widen the dual malnutrition burden in developing countries, which we have to be very careful in upcoming strategy designing and policy direction. Mental health is also another important factor which is associated with food insecurity. So these are the take-home messages of what I can say from the literature on food and nutrition security issues during the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dipta. That was a very comprehensive presentation. I think after this, I do not need to make any long chairman's remarks. So thank you very much. We will be sharing this presentation with all of you, and I'm sure it will kind of ring a bell in your mind, because these are situations, similar situations are there in your country. So I will not take more time. I think we have already overshot by 15 minutes. Of course, all of you are going to have a 3-day respite from this training. So see you all on Monday. And if there is any particular literature, etc., that you want, give it in our WhatsApp group a message. But we have already shared the message, the literature with you. So just have some patience. By tomorrow, you will get all the literature. You can go through it. And please think about it in the context of your own country. So with that, I think, Professor Param, there is no housekeeping announcement now. I hope not.
No, there is no any.
Okay, in that case, let us thank all the participants for their patience, and I hope you found it useful. And do get back to us with your questions. We will try and then address them. And Monday we will, as I said, Monday we will start at 2 o'clock, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, each session will be extra half an hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Yeah,
Bye
thank
bye.
you. Yeah, all of you have a very nice 3-day break weekend.
Thank you.
And yeah, we meet on Monday.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Enjoy the weekend.
you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.